Tonight, the world remembers a Pope of the people.
Here in Rome, thousands gather to pay their respects to Pope Francis. Lying in state in the apartments where he died, the Vatican announces his funeral will take place on Saturday. After 12 years at the helm of the Catholic Church, a moment to reflect and to question what comes next.
To move with the times, I think there's still a lot that we need to grow and be more inclusive as a church.
I'll speak to a former close friend of the Pope's as the world leaders and royalty confirm they will attend his funeral. Also tonight, the latest from India as at least 20 tourists are shot dead in one of the country's most popular beauty spots. Plus, the IMF slashes the world's growth forecast following Donald Trump's tariff turmoil.
Good evening, live from Rome. Vatican City behind me. The seat of the Roman Catholic Church today lies in mourning following the death of Pope Francis. Thousands have been gathering in St. Peter's Square to pay their respects and offer thanks for his time as spiritual leader. Officials here have confirmed the Pope's funeral will take place on Saturday morning, with both world leaders and royalty due to attend. We'll have more on the Church's next steps, what will make Pope Francis' funeral a complete break from tradition, and what some of the 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide are looking for in their new leader. But first, our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons has this report.
For the first time in more than a decade, the Vatican awoke with no pope to look to for guidance. Here's an absence felt by more than 1 billion Catholics. By the morning, nearly half the world's cardinals had arrived. These are the people who will decide the name of the next pope. But their first task was to schedule Francis's funeral, and they chose Saturday morning. The crowds here growing fast. They mourn, but many also celebrate a life that inspired them. Sister Mary moved to Rome from Kenya 10 years ago. How will you remember him?
I will remember him especially for his smile, his love, his humanity, and a man who gave us hope, even when we thought that everything is lost. I will remember him that way.
We now know the Pope woke as normal on Monday at 6 a.m, but suffered a stroke about an hour later. A police escort was requested to get him to hospital, and it was then cancelled when it became clear that Francis could not recover. The Pope lies in state within the Vatican. His funeral service will be held here, but then he will be taken across Rome to the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, where he will be buried. There we met Marcela and Pablo, here from Buenos Aires, and deeply proud of their Argentinian compatriot.
He worked a lot with young people, with the humble and the poor.
We already knew what he was like when he was Bishop of Buenos Aires. He would travel on the metro. He didn't have a driver. He did mass in the poor areas, and he worked a lot on the issue of immigration. It was something that really concerned him.
Back at the Vatican, the sun beats down and the square ever more packed. Pope Francis's decision not to be buried here at St. Peter's, but instead across town at Santa Maria Maggiore, is a break with tradition. It's not unprecedented, but it's certainly unusual. And it means that the task of organising this event, already dauntingly complex, has now become even more complicated. Prince William will represent the King. Keir Starmer will also attend. Presidents and prime ministers from America, France, Germany, and of course Italy and Argentina are all coming to Rome, and many more leaders will follow. The security operation is huge. Cars banned, a no-fly zone, and police boats on the Tiber. It is a big challenge for Matteo Scamma, the person in charge of protecting everyone and everything involved in this funeral.
This is certainly something new for us, but we'll be ready for this occasion. We'll have enough personnel to ensure safety both at the Vatican and during the transfer, which is also important, and then of course at the event itself, for the burial.
Pope Francis's body will be moved into St. Peter's Basilica tomorrow, when the public will be able to file past, and the crowds here will simply grow and grow.
Well, Adam joins me now from Vatican City, and Pope Francis had tried to inject elements of simplicity into this. Nonetheless, as we saw in your report, this is a massive undertaking. Italian police estimating, between 200,000 and 500,000 people will attend, and 170 presidents and heads of state delegations, Adam.
Yeah, it is going to be an enormous event, of course, the focus of the world. Now, let's put this in a little bit of context. When Pope Francis attended St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday, it was considered to be pretty packed, and there were 40,000 people there on that occasion. There could be up to 500,000 here. Now, clearly, they won't all fit into St. Peter's Square, so they will spill over into roads like this one and roads all around this area. When I was here a couple of years ago for the funeral of Pope Benedict, it was believed that about 65,000 people were there. So, of course, this will be vastly bigger than that, and attended by this long line of presidents and heads of state, around 170 expected to come, and already the people that we know are coming bring diplomatic, political heft. So these are the leaders from the United States, Great Britain, France, Brazil, all coming out here, Argentina, the home of Pope Francis, as well as people like Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. It is very rare that you get so many of these hugely influential and significant individuals brought together in one place, and extremely uncommon that that is happening against a short time frame. And as we heard from the person commanding the security here, it is a daunting undertaking for them, but one that they insist they are comfortable with. As for what happens now, well, tomorrow morning people will begin, I'm sure, to queue up from very early on to get the opportunity to file past Pope Francis's coffin as it lies in St. Peter's Basilica here in Vatican City. That will go on until the evening of Friday, not through the night, but it is stopped each evening, so it'll stop on Friday night, and then, of course, on Saturday morning, the coffin, the service will happen, and then ultimately that coffin will be taken from here to Santa Maria Maggiore, this papal basilica, a little way across the city. And I think there are various elements here. And first of all, we have had the grief. At the moment, when you talk to people here, there is a certain feeling of being uplifted, of feeling that this was a celebration of a life well lived. I think now we will go into this more somber period when people see the casket containing Pope Francis before we head into the duality, if you like, the seriousness, and certainly the mournful nature of a funeral, combined with this remarkable number of highly influential, important, prominent individuals gathering from around the world for the funeral, and of course after that the conclave to decide the identity of the person, the man who will follow Pope Francis.
Adam Parsons, thank you. Well, as we've been hearing, the intention is that Pope Francis's funeral will offer a far simpler tone compared with more elaborate ceremonies of the past. Let's take a closer look then at how the traditions and rituals already underway will unfold at key sites across Vatican City and beyond. Well, unlike previous pontiffs, Francis lived at the Casa Santa Maria. He stayed at Santa Marta, rather. He stayed here while attending the previous conclave and decided to remain upon being selected as Pope rather than move to the papal apartments. His body has been placed in an open casket in the adjoining Santa Marta Chapel. Tomorrow morning, the coffin will be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica via the nearby courtyards and squares and through the Arch of the Bells. The coffin carrying the late Pope will then emerge into St. Peter's Square before being taken in through the central door of the Basilica. The Pope's body will lie in state there for 3 days before his funeral at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. In a break from tradition, the Pope requested to be buried at the Papal Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore outside the Vatican in Rome, rather than in the Vatican crypt. It's a place that Francis had a very close connection to. Then, 9 days later, attention will return to the Vatican for the conclave. 134 cardinals will gather at the Sistine Chapel with its famous ceiling painted by Michelangelo to vote on a new pope. Once the new pontiff is selected, white smoke will rise from the chapel's chimney and the bells of St. Peter's Basilica will ring. Well, my colleague Barbara Serra has been to the church where Pope Francis has chosen to be buried.
For a pope who broke with tradition so often in life, it's perhaps not surprising that Pope Francis has chosen to do so in death. Most of his predecessors, most popes, are buried in the crypt underneath St. Peter's Basilica. But Pope Francis wanted to be buried here. This is the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, one of his favorite churches, and crucially outside of the Vatican. Now, why did the Pope want to be buried here? Well, he was very devoted to the Virgin Mary, and this church is dedicated to the Virgin Mary. He would often come here to pray, sometimes before big international trips, but sometimes just on his own. And the last time he came here was the eve of Palm Sunday, just 9 days before he died. It's not unprecedented for popes to be buried here. 7 popes have been buried in this basilica. The last one was Clement IX back in 1669. But just because it's not unprecedented doesn't mean it's not going to throw up some logistical issues. The funeral is going to be in St. Peter's Square. When that is over, the body will have to go from St. Peter's Square to here. Now, obviously, it's a 20-minute drive. There's going to be road closures. There's going to be a procession, something akin to a state funeral. But once the body is here, then this will effectively become a place of pilgrimage, a place of veneration. If you look over there, there is a queue, and you see a similar queue every day to get into this basilica. But when Pope Francis will be buried here, once this is his final resting place, that queue will be much bigger. Many more people will come here, and that is going to bring up issues with security and crowd flow for this basilica.
Well, Barbara is here with me now, and there is a sense already that this will become a site of pilgrimage for those who follow and want to venerate the Pope.
Absolutely. You couldn't really see it in that piece, but I spoke at length to a lot of people queuing, and there were lots of people queuing, maybe about 100 at any one time. And a lot of them would go there anyway, because in fairness, it's a beautiful basilica. But I guess half the people there had heard that that's where the Pope was going to be buried, and they said that they specifically wanted to go and have a look to see the inside of this church before he was buried there. So I think it's quite clear that it will become a place of veneration and a place, where people can go and pay their respects to the Pope. And it's interesting because a lot of people that I spoke to, again, I think some of them weren't even particularly that religious. And we've been talking so much about the things that Pope Francis did, his legacy, the way, interreligious dialogue or trying to be more inclusive. But I think for so many people, it really was about personality and the way that he would speak. And there's all these memes going on online about things that he said in the past. So it was very interesting speaking to the people queuing there. Obviously, there's an element, it's a beautiful church, so people will always be queuing there. But I do think the queues will be a lot longer there once the Pope is buried.
And what is the mood here? Clearly, the moment will be when we see the Pope's casket moved into the building behind us, when people can start to painstakingly queue to get to see his body, something we are not used to really in the UK.
I think that's when you really see how many people have turned out in Rome to see, you know, to pay their last respects. Just anecdotally, and it's difficult to have exact statistics, I sense that there's a lot more foreigners here right now than there would be normally. Maybe it was Easter weekend when they, you know, hoped that they would see him anyway. It's Jubilee year, you know, maybe it's just lovely April when people are here in Rome. So it really will be interesting. And, you know, already if we think back to when Pope John Paul II died, there were queues that lasted for days until the lying in state ended. And of course, we didn't see that in 2013 because the last time that there was a new pope, when Pope Francis was made pope, remember there wasn't a death because Pope Benedict hadn't died. So we went straight into the conclave without having the funeral. And so I think a lot of people, again, because of what he meant to them, but also the strength of his personality, I think we'll see a lot of people queue to pay their last respects.
Yes, and of course, Pope Francis oversaw the funeral of his predecessor, something which also never happens. Barbara, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, it is important to remember that the Pope's influence spreads far beyond the borders of the Vatican. 1.4 billion Catholics are waiting to see what future direction the Church will take. While membership across Europe has been in remission, the numbers of those joining the Church have been steadily increasing in places such as Africa. Cardinals from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana and Guinea are among the contenders for the papacy. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland has this report.
The pilgrims come now to the seat of power of the Catholic Church at a time of transition. Life goes on in the hustle and bustle of St. Peter's Square. So too does the business of the Church. The meeting of Rome's cardinals, just the start of shaping the next chapter of Catholicism.
The College of Cardinals has to decide whether or not they want to continue on the path of reform initiated by Pope Francis, of making the Church more open to the modern world, to being more inclusive of all of its members, or to dial the clock back and to go back to a Church that's more interested in sort of leading with doctrine first and what the Church is against rather than what it's for.
It's a special time to be at the Vatican. Those buying souvenirs give a sense of the Church's massive reach. With many new Catholics coming from the Southern Hemisphere queuing to get in, there's no shortage of people wanting to connect with the Church. The decisions being made here at the Vatican in the coming days will influence the growing and changing Catholic Church around the world. But what do Catholics want from their next Pope?
We hope that the new Pope will continue the openness of the Church and, accomplish whatever he probably started.
What direction would you like the Church to go in?
To move with the times. I think there's still a lot that we need to grow and be more inclusive as a church, yeah. So that's the direction that I'm hoping.
Are you confident the cardinals will elect someone who will do that?
That's a tough one. I hope they do, though. I hope they do.
Some in the Church believe the foundations have been laid to continue in the spirit of Pope Francis.
Nowadays, the Pope, Francois, had been having many cardinals coming from all around the world. So I think the cardinals are much more representative of Catholic Church because they come from all the world around.
You're from Mexico.
Yeah.
What do Mexican people want from the next Pope?
Yeah, that closeness, that openness, that testimony of faith. Yeah.
And do you think the cardinals will deliver what the people want or what they want?
The same.
For others, it's too soon to consider a future without Francis. Sister Anugrah Minj from India works at the Vatican translating the Pope's messages into Hindi. She's just come from viewing the Pope's open casket.
Looks like he's sleeping. He's sleeping.
That obviously must have been a very emotional experience for you.
Yes, many were in tears. I was also in tears. I cried. I could not control myself because I have seen him many times.
What sort of Pope would you like to see next?
That I don't know. We cannot say.
From the Philippines to South Korea and across South America, Catholics around the world are in mourning. and waiting to see what this transition will mean for them. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Vatican City.
Well, as we've been saying, thousands have been gathering to pay their respects. Let's have a listen. Well, this was the scene at St. Peter's Square a little earlier this evening, a choir performing. The Vatican had invited people to the square to pray the rosary for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. That's how they put it. The body of the late Pope will be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday morning to lie in state until his funeral on Saturday morning. And people will be invited to come and see him and pay their respects about 2 hours after his arrival. And then St. Peter's Basilica will be open tomorrow night until midnight, and then again on Thursday and on Friday, where it will close a little earlier ahead of that funeral. Well, earlier I spoke to the former Italian Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi. He became Prime Minister in 2014. The Pope was elected in 2013 as Pontiff. He told me some may look at Francis as a strange Pope because he was so informal and different compared to his predecessors. Mr. Renzi also spoke fondly about the Pope's stance on migration.
Pope Francis spent the first official visit as Pope in Lampedusa, which is the Sicilian island, who is probably the most important land for migrants, because it's the first island the people from Africa arrive at. And for that, it was a very source of inspiration for the migration issues. He tried to push Europe in the direction to a different policy in the welcome migrants.
Well, that informality that Matteo Renzi talked about, seen in some of the pictures here, that informality which allowed him to be close to the people, that was his intention. He was the son of Italian immigrants brought up in Argentina, and he eschewed all the trappings, even there as Archbishop in Argentina, choosing to live in simple accommodation, and the same here in Rome at the Vatican after being elected Pontiff in 2013, choosing to stay in the buildings, the guest house, where he also voted as part of that conclave. He didn't want to go into the palace. The simplicity of his life, his humility, that informality, you can see quite clearly in these pictures. And Yalda, I know you've had, close quarter contact with him. You've met the Pope. And really, it was about the people for him, and serving the people was his intention.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. As you say, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had an audience with the Pope, a very small group of people, not in my capacity as a journalist, but I also have a foundation for girls' education. And it was that sort of thing that he was interested in, philanthropy and really trying to give a voice to the voiceless, and charity, looking at people who were suffering and from poor communities. So, the Vatican reached out and I was invited there, a really small handful of people. We had a private mass with the Pope at the Vatican as well, and it was quite extraordinary. As you say, an incredibly personable, charismatic and informal character, a meeting that I will certainly never forget. Anna, thank you so much for all of your coverage. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, actually, Yalda, that, it was the marginalised in society that he really wanted to care for. And a short time ago, I walked down to St. Peter's Square where that choir was singing. And there in the street, there was a Catholic charity handing food out to homeless people about 50 yards from the Basilica, and how delighted the Pope would be that those poorer in society were being helped here in Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was quintessentially what he was about. And as you say, he downsized. He was often known to, dine either on his own or with a small group of people and like to live a very modest and humble life. Anna, thank you so much for all of your coverage. We will be coming back to you a little later in the programme. For all of our viewers, do stay with us. We've got lots more coming up. I'll be joined by a close friend of the late Pope here on the programme after the break. Stay with us.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to the programme. Well, for millions around the world, Pope Francis was a spiritual leader, a man who championed the poor and reformed the Catholic Church. But for some, he'll also be remembered as a close friend. Well, joining me now in the studio is someone who knew the Pope personally, John Strudinsky. Thank you so much, John, for joining us here on the programme. We were just talking there in the ad break. I mean, I know that you were a close friend of his. You knew him for about 12 years or so, and it was your work in philanthropy that brought you close to him. We've talked about how he championed philanthropy and trying to be close to those who are suffering and the poor. But just tell me how you're feeling this evening, because we've known he was ill for some time, but when something like this happens, it still leaves a sort of a void.
I think he's gone home, and I think the story on this earth ends well for him. He lived to see Easter Sunday. He participated in the Easter Vigil, which is the most sacred Catholic rite in the entire year, and he was there. And neither you nor I would let any member of our family go through the type of physical indignity. I mean, you could see how ill he was the last several days, but he basically said, I'm going to be in the square, and he defied everyone, and his energy up until the very last minute. And we know now that he deteriorated within 30 minutes, and he died very quickly. He always said to me, Juan, you're not dying until you actually are dying. And I really felt that he knew in that last few minutes that he was dying, and he was going home to God, and that's that. And I don't feel, people are a bit shocked and say, why don't you, because I think when you cry and you mourn, you're mourning for yourself. He's gone home, he's gone to the Lord. And as you know, Catholic scripture, the day after Easter, the day after the resurrection, is the day that Christ returns to his apostles. So here we are with the Holy Father returning to the Lord. It's a very beautiful, if you were writing the script, you couldn't do better than this particular Holy Father did in terms of his departure.
And John, how would you like to remember him? I mean, everyone is having their moment, the faithful and those who have met him, to think about his legacy. How would you like him to be remembered, and how will you be remembering him?
Well, there's the public remembrance and the private remembrance. The public remembrance is going to be about his humility, his simplicity, how he challenged materialism. You know, he was very ambivalent about corporations. He was very understated about spending money. Whenever I had organized something around an event, he would ask me how much it cost, and I would tell him, and he'd say, no, you can't spend that money. We'll find a way to save money, because he never wanted to spend money. So very much humility, very humble, but very focused on humanity. Privately, very blunt, very funny, and quite willing to share his frailties. You know, the first thing he would say, regardless of how well you knew him, is, please pray for me today. Please pray for me every day. And everyone will say, I'm sure he said that to you when you met him, but he was genuinely sincere. That is the way he felt. He never forgot his background. He never forgot his struggles and where he came from, you know, and what happened in Argentina and all of that. So he was very real and very present.
Yes, and as you say, often blunt, and he would do things that would catch people by surprise, whether it was telling a joke or getting involved in geopolitics, you know, whether it came to issues around mass migration, for example. Or I remember this extraordinary image of him bowing down and touching the feet of the South Sudanese leaders, begging them for peace.
I think he actually tried to kiss their feet.
They were shocked. I mean,
Yes.
that image is quite an extraordinary one.
Yeah, and particularly at that point in history, and it was such a dangerous place for him to even go to. But again, he was very interested in an element of drama, an element of shock. I mean, we think a bit about John Paul II, who we recall was trained as an actor and had a sense of theater and knew how to create a big statement. He had a sense of sort of private sort of shock and statement, and he would do things intentionally. And his most clever vignette, when he was meeting world leaders, he would always start with some type of humor, And it was, I use the expression, he would often pepper wisdom with humor or pepper humor with wisdom, to the point where the leader couldn't really, is he telling a joke or is he serious? And then he would decide whether to take the conversation forward or not.
When we think about his legacy, it's kind of what happens next, which is also crucial to all of this. What does the next Pope hang on to in terms of the legacy that he's tried to create? And what do they sort of almost reverse? Because it wasn't all, you know, sort of roses for him. He was dealing with complexities within the Vatican as well, and he was dealing with sometimes a movement of conservatives that were not happy with certain things that he was doing.
Well, the Church has always had the right and the left, and I think we have this tendency to want to write history prematurely. We want to write someone's legacy early, and I actually think it takes many years. I mean, if you look at the legacy of John Paul II, he's now record fast-tracked to sainthood. If you look at Benedict, he was regarded as a sort of interim transitional pope. But now, once we've really understood his writings, particularly his book on Jesus of Nazareth, he's regarded as one of the most important German theologians in the last 200 years. Profound. So one has to take some time before we look at what are the real building blocks that Francis has brought. One thing Francis, I've always was conscious of him. He would say to me, I know this isn't going to work, but I'm going to move the ball down the field this far, and if it gets kicked back, it's still gone a lot further down the field than when we started. So he always knew he was going to be challenged, but he knew that he was moving in the direction he wanted to go.
And he had that kind of influence where he would say something and people would obviously sit up because he's the Pope, but it's just the way he also carried himself and the message. I mean, you know, we heard from a priest in Gaza who said he would phone every single day. He wouldn't miss that phone call, even when he was quite ill just a few weeks ago. He had certain beliefs and principles that he wouldn't sort of allow anything to sort of, you know, change, really.
He had a sense of, on one level, he was the Pope, but on his genuine level, he was the shepherd. And to that man in Gaza, I'm sure he felt he was his shepherd and he had no choice. He needed to make that call. And you could see the people around him, and I saw this with a lot of the work we did together in modern slavery and trafficking, and a number of the very senior sisters. We've got about 1.5 million sisters working globally in 90 countries working against modern slavery and human trafficking. And he was so focused on hearing their stories and understanding how he could support them, even in very simple ways.
John, really fascinating talking to you. I know you're heading to the Vatican shortly and you'll be there for the funeral as well this weekend. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, let's head back to Rome and speak again to Anna. Anna, we're getting so much from the people that we're speaking to here. I know you're getting a lot from those you're speaking to in Rome, but over to you for now.
Yes, Yalda, thank you. And I'm joined now by Professor Father Francesco Giordano, a diocesan priest and theology professor. I know you've been travelling, and I know you found the news of Pope Francis's death shocking. How are you feeling now? How are you processing this information?
Well, just like anyone who's had a death in the family, it takes time to process. I mean, even though we were expecting him to die, because, I mean, he had many health problems, and so it's not shocking that he died, but it's always shocking to have someone in your family die, and the Church is a family. So you have to remember the Holy Father. And so it takes time to process the death of a Holy Father.
We've heard so much about how he lived his life with humility and simplicity. He was a man of the people, for the people. You know, how do you reflect on him and his life, and indeed his legacy?
Well, I just recently wrote an article on this, on his legacy, how to explain the legacy of this Pope. Historically speaking, to understand the legacy of any Pope takes time. It takes time to digest, as I'm saying, it takes time to digest his death, it takes time to reflect on his legacy. It's not something you can say right after his death. In fact, what I said to Sky News on Monday upon the news of his passing, I reflected on the fact that 20 years ago, Pope Benedict XVI was elected on the 19th of April, 2005. On the 2nd of April was the death of John Paul II, Saint John Paul II now. We're still reflecting on those popes now. So, and it takes time to digest all this. So yes, of course, for the people, yes. But I mean, a lot of these popes were for the people. If you think about John Paul II, I mean, what is the role of a pope but being a father and being a father of the church and of a father for all of us to guide us? The Pope is is entrusted to the successor of St. Peter, is entrusted to guide the flock, to confirm us in the faith. That's what Jesus said to St. Peter. Confirm the flock in the faith. That's the role of the Pope.
And what about you personally? Did he challenge you? And if so, how?
Oh, that's a big question. Did the Pope challenge me? Of course the Pope challenged me. The Pope challenged all of us in different times different times require different popes and different require different responses. How did he challenge me? Well, he did challenge us, a lot of us priests. He kept telling us all the time to go outside of the sacristies, to go out. He was always telling us to go out, to be missionary in many ways, which stems in many ways from his own missionary order. He's a Jesuit. The Jesuits were missionaries. So this going outward was something he always talked about, trying to reach out to the people. It was his message. So he was constantly challenging us priests to go out. It wasn't always understood. It wasn't always understood the way it should have been understood, I think. I think that there was also a lot of politicization. There was a lot of people playing, the left and the right. And
do you mean in terms of issues like migration, for example?
Yes,
and his work towards peace in certain wars and
yes. There's always politics involved in the interpretations of these things. This is why I said we need to take time to reflect upon things, because if you look at it just politically, then it looks like this. And sometimes he would say things that were contradictory to people. You'd think that seemed contradictory or paradoxical, I should say. So, for instance, I remember when he went. Just recently, about a year ago, he went to Singapore, I believe it was, and there he was saying, about, God. He was being very generous in the sense of welcoming everyone to God and telling people to practice, all their different faiths, even though they were not necessarily Catholic. He was in an audience that was not Catholic. There were Muslims. There was all sorts of, and he said things that theologically speaking were. People took controversy with that. Then he came shortly thereafter, I remember, to Belgium, and there insisted on everyone, being Catholic, being firmly Catholic. There were people. I remember when there were all these interpretations, people were confused about it. Here he's saying this, and so what you have to do is you have to try to interpret and try to understand. Well, what is he really trying to say? Well, and that's where it wasn't always easy. Also, and when he would speak with the press, he would say things that were a little bit off the cuff, and so people would use that, and there was always this sort of thing with him.
Father, we're running out of time. I do apologise.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to say thank you to you. Thank you so much for joining us here. Father Francesco Giordano, and obviously you'll be hoping to pay your own respects to Pope Francis. Thank you very much indeed. Yalda, back to you.
Anna, thank you so much. Well, as preparations continue for his funeral and crowds gather at the Vatican to honour Pope Francis, the question turns to what his legacy might look like. From working as a bouncer at a Buenos Aires nightclub to the leader of the Catholic Church, the world is looking back at his time in the Vatican and the influence he's had beyond it. Well, joining me now is Father Manuel de Elia, Doctor of Theology. Thank you so much, Father, for joining us here on the programme. You know, everyone we are speaking to about the legacy of the Pope say, well, actually, it's too soon to talk about the legacy. It might take many years before we can fully understand what legacy he leaves behind. But certainly people tonight and since yesterday are remembering the Pope for who he was, what he stood for, and what he created out of the Vatican and the changes that he made.
Yes, good evening to the audience, and thank you for having me here. Everyone is thinking now on the legacy, I think, and in my own heart, I am thinking of that. I would like to put that in three words. I would say, first of all, one of the main words he used, that is joy. The other one, mercy. And the last one, the poor. Joy, because faith and Christianity at its core and religion in general is always talking of happiness, of fullness of life, of flourishing. Mercy, of course, because Jesus Christ taught us and Francis helped us a lot to find out that, to look at one another with respect, with affection, with trust. And a very important thing for him, the poor, not the abstract concept of poverty, but the poor in a very concrete way, because in this time, astonishing progress goes hand in hand with a growing poverty in many places of the world. And I think that is his social message is a great legacy. In that sense, I think that he was very uncomfortable for a lot of politicians and leaders, but I think that is one of the most important legacies he left us.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess for you met him about 25 years ago. He was the first non-European Latin American Pope. What does it mean for you and I guess, you know, the Catholic faith in South America that you had a representative like him at the top of the Catholic Church?
Yeah, it means a lot, in part because we never thought of having an Argentinian Pope, and it was a real surprise when it came out, and it was a very, very happy surprise. I liked that a lot. And at the same time, we felt that it was okay to have a non-European Pope, because the Church is from all around the world. It's not only a European organization, I would say it is universal Catholic, as we say.
Yes. And I guess for you, how would you like to remember him? As I said, you met him over 2 decades ago. Did he change much from that time to now?
I think that it's already written and recognized by himself that he changed quite a lot, I would say. When he became Pope, he was not much a man usually smiling. He was very serious. When he became Pope, that would need a clarification, because in the personal relations, he was very cute, he was very blunt, like John Sadnitsky said before. I agree a lot with him. He was a very joyful person. But in general, in public occasions, he was very serious always. And when he became Pope, we all were a bit surprised with that. Of my occasions with him, I remember one some 10 years ago when he began talking about the shepherd with the smell of sheep, after a reunion with 400 priests in Buenos Aires, we get out from there talking about that, and we remembered a new vision of the old parable of Jesus Christ of the lost sheep, that there is one sheep lost and 99 in the flock. And at a certain point in this moment of history, if Jesus would come again, I think that things would change. We were talking about that we have one sheep in the fold, overprotected and overfed, and we have to tell her to make a bit of exercise, to go and look for the 99 outside the fold. So that was a typical way of thinking of his, as he used to say, a church that is going out to help others.
Yes, I mean, we just heard from his close friend, John Strudinsky, who talked about how he viewed himself as a shepherd, that he had no choice but to do certain things, certainly when it came to helping the most vulnerable. How do you think he would like to be remembered?
I think that he would he is now present to our talk, because as our faith know and feel, he is actually in the presence of God, and he can hear us, even if we don't feel it and we don't know it directly. I think that he would like to be remembered as a pastor, as a shepherd. That word, I think, that would fix very, very well how he felt himself.
Yeah, well, Father Manuel, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme and sharing your thoughts.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. Good night. Good evening.
Good night. Well, let's go to the rest of the day's news now. And at least 20 tourists have been killed by gunmen in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Dozens of others were injured in the attack, which police have blamed on militants fighting Indian rule. Nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan each administer part of Kashmir, and there are regular skirmishes along the border. The incident in Pahalgam would signify a major escalation in the regional conflict. Sky's Neville Lazarus reports.
A terror attack shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. Families were enjoying their holidays in an off-road meadow in Pahalgam, known as Mini Switzerland, when militants opened fire, killing many and injuring dozens. The injured were taken to hospitals. Many were in a state of shock and distress. Security forces were rushed to the site of the attack and have laid cordons checking vehicles. Military helicopters were conducting sorties, scanning the area. Scores of tourists have left the area for safety.
We will now go back to Srinagar. We'd come to Pahalgam for a visit. Because of the terrorist attack, we will go back. We were stuck here for 4 hours.
Prime Minister Modi cut short his visit to Saudi Arabia and is expected to return to India tonight. In a statement on X, he paid homage to those who lost their lives and said, "Those behind these heinous acts will be brought to justice. They will not be spared. The evil agenda will never succeed. Our resolve to fight terrorism is unshakable, and it will get even stronger." In a statement on Truth Social, President Trump said the United States stands strong with India against terrorism. We pray for the soul of those lost and for the recovery of the injured. Prime Minister Modi and the incredible people of India have our full support and deepest sympathies. Our hearts are with you. His Deputy Vice President J.D. Vance is on a 4-day official trip to India and had earlier met with Prime Minister Modi. This is one of the worst terror attacks in recent times. Tourists have largely been spared by militants. In 2019, an attack by a vehicle-borne suicide bomber on a military convoy killed 40 paramilitary soldiers. India blamed Pakistan for giving shelter to Islamist terrorists and conducted limited airstrikes across the border. A tense standoff between two nuclear-armed countries have lasted since. Both countries administer part of Kashmir and claim the territory in the entirety. But it's ordinary people that pay the highest price of conflict. Neville Lazarus, Sky News, Delhi.
You're looking at live images of Vatican City, the seat of the Roman Catholic Church. And today it lies in mourning following the death, of course, of Pope Francis. And you can see thousands of people are still gathering late into the night in St. Peter's Square to pay their respects and offer thanks for his time as their spiritual leader. And the officials have confirmed that the Pope's funeral will take place on Saturday morning, with both world leaders and royalty due to attend. But you're seeing pictures of hundreds of people still gathered there, paying their respects to the late Pope who died yesterday. We'll have more on the Church's next steps over the coming days and, of course, the conclave where the choosing of the next Pope will take place, as well as the Pope's funeral, which will be a complete break from tradition and what some of the 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide are looking for in their new leader as well. And I'm going to show you these images of my meeting with Pope Francis that took place a few years ago, rather. Good night for now.